Here we are, everyone. Dr. Jenkins here. So this is a two-parter. In this first part, we're going to be talking about water. And then in the second video, we'll be talking about minerals. So here we go. This is going to be all about water, as the picture suggests. So remember that water is a macronutrient. Let's put that in red. Our macronutrients, we have 4 of them. I gotta make sure I can spell at the same time as I'm talking. Our macronutrients are carbohydrates, fat, protein, and water. We need a lot of water. And then our micronutrients, which are no less important, but we just happen to need them in smaller amounts through our diet, vitamins and minerals. So these are our last 2 nutrients. This video is going to be about water, the macronutrient, and then we'll talk about minerals, our last micronutrient, in the next video. Okay, so here is our outline for water. Minerals, second video. But for water, here we go, folks. Everyone knows it's important, but now we're going to get down and dirty, talk about why. Okay, so did you know, I think some of you probably had a pretty good idea about this, but our body is largely water. So you should know about 60% of our body is water. It's a roundabout number depending on the person or the situation. And we tend to store water. Let's keep this really simple. Either we store water inside of the cells or outside of the cells. If we have cells, either there's fluid inside the cell, and that would be intracellular fluid. And then there's also going to be fluid outside of the cells. There's fluid that fills in the space. So the fluid outside of the cells is called extracellular fluid. I mean, for once, we kind of made it easier on ourselves, didn't we? I like that. Okay. Let's talk more about that. The intracellular fluid is where we have about 2/3 of all of our water. And I think that will surprise some people. Inside of our cells is where we have most of our water. Our cells are plump with water. And then the remaining third or so is found between the cells. You can see a further breakdown in the extracellular fluid, what is in our blood plasma, which is here, versus what is in the extracellular fluid, but you don't need to know that. Just know the big percentages. And it might surprise you, again, most of our water, 2/3 of it, is inside of the cells. Here's a real cross-section of a kidney. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. This is an actual kidney. It's pretty cool, right? So if we look at it, we can see that there are cells. So let's see. Here's a cell. I'm actually generalizing a little bit. It's a little bit more complicated than this, but for the purpose of our understanding, we can just say that there's intracellular fluid, and then there's all this extracellular fluid between the cells. So it makes sense that there's going to be a lot more water inside the cells. Now, we don't care only about water. We care about these electrolytes, these ions that carry a charge and have a current. We're going to be talking mostly about potassium and sodium. You're going to get tired of me talking about them. If you take anatomy and physiology, you'll really get tired of me talking about it. So what you need to know is inside of the cells, there is a lot of potassium. Inside the cells, right? Here's a cell, here's a cell. Potassium tends to hang out inside the cells, whereas sodium tends to hang out in the extracellular fluid. And you can see that in the picture also. So make sure you know that more potassium inside the cells, more sodium outside the cells. And as you may already have guessed, this water, it's always moving. Our body's just not a stagnant thing. Water's always moving. Water's going to move. Having a hard time determining what color to use. I don't know why. Water will sometimes move into a cell. And then some water, a couple minutes later, will move outside the cell. Sometimes water will move from the bloodstream into the tissues. Excuse me. Ooh, I knew that was coming. I apologize. Another one. Pardon me again. So sometimes the water moves into the tissues. Sometimes water will move from the tissues back into the bloodstream. So water is always moving around. It'll move around through osmosis and diffusion. Excuse me. So what I'm pointing out is there is constant movement of fluid between the intra and extracellular fluid compartments. So it's not just stagnant. Things move in, things move out, and that's what we'd expect. It means that we're able to shift water and shift electrolytes to where they're needed. However, it also means that we've got to be careful to maintain balance. So even though there's always going to be water moving, at a given point in time, we have to have the right amount of water in each space. So most of this water is moving through osmosis. You've probably heard of this before. Let's just make sure. Osmosis is the movement of water. When we say osmosis, we're talking about water from areas of high to low concentration. It is passive. It happens without energy, without ATP. So if you have a lot of water in one area and less water in another, and there's a semi-permeable membrane in between, water will move through diffusion from high to low. We call that process osmosis. Look here. Here we have a lot of water. It's blue. That's my scientific term. A lot of water. Here we have no water. We have some solutes, those red dots. But look, here we have a lot of water. Here we have none. And there is a semi-permeable membrane. So what's going to happen? Water's going to move from high to low. Eventually, water will even out. There'll be the same amount of water here as there is here. Now, in terms of nutrition, we utilize osmosis in other ways also. What I was talking about before was how water moves inside the body. How does water move into or out of a cell? Osmosis. It moves from high to low inside the body. But we can also utilize osmosis in the preparation of food. Let's take vegetables. I know you may not be that familiar with them. Please try. Here's an eggplant. Eggplant has a lot of water content. There's certain fruits and vegetables that have a high water content. And if you want to cook up some eggplant and you don't get some of the water out, it'll be kind of like floppy and spongy when you cook it. Instead, don't you want the eggplant to have like a little crisp outside to it? Yes. So if we add salt to the surface of the eggplant and let it sit for a little bit, water is going to come out. This is a really important principle, so I'm going to write it down. Water follows salt or sodium. Very important principle. We talked about sodium, didn't we? Sure did. It's found in higher amounts outside of the cell. Well, something that's unique, water follows it. So if sodium goes to the right, water's going to go to the right. If sodium moves into the cell, water's going to move into the cell. So we can use that to our advantage in this eggplant example. It's a really waterlogged vegetable. If I sprinkle salt over it and wait a little bit, the water is going to come to the salt. So the water is going to come out of the vegetable, meaning we're going to be able to cook it and have it not be like a wet, sopping thing. When you want to rehydrate things, take if you have a dried fruit. We can just utilize osmosis in this bottom example. If I want to rehydrate something, I put those dehydrated pieces of fruit in water. Water will diffuse in, plump them right back up. So we can utilize this to our example, to our benefit, Okay, here's a topic that is important, and let's really break it down as simply as we can. Electrolytes. Everybody's heard of them, right? I think so. Oh, if you're an athlete or if you're outside working and you're sweating a lot, you need to have your Gatorade. It contains those electrolytes. Let's really talk about what electrolytes are. So, the definition that I like to use, and if you look at different sources, different textbooks, for example, you might see it defined a different way. It all means the same thing, but I prefer to come at it this way. I think it's easier to understand. Electrolytes are charged particles that can carry a current. Boom. We've already talked about two, sodium and potassium. Excellent. I'm just going to pause 1 minute and then we'll return for the rest.